Tacky Talk Time. State Representative Tacky Chan of Quincy is back with us after a week's hiatus. Hey, Tacky, how are you?
Hey Joe, good to see you after a week off. I hope everyone listening had a good school vacation week. For those who had school vacation week, talking about the city of Newton who didn't get school vacation week. Hope people had a little bit of time off their families, enjoy the President's Day weekend, and hopefully people are feeling more refreshed as we head into the month of March, because today's a leap day.
That's right. Happy Leap Day. Every 4 years, we get an extra day in February, and it certainly feels like it today.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we are actually right. Our 4 year anniversary is coming up pretty quick in April. The two of us, since we started doing a communication to constituency and beyond in this particular manner, and the time is moving quickly. I mean, was it March winds, April showers, bring you May flowers? But it appears that March winds have gotten a head start in February.
That's right. By all accounts, Lunar New Year and Winterfest were huge successes again this year.
Yeah, congratulations to Quincy Asian Resources and obviously all the city employees and the mayor's office and the council for putting together family-friendly events during the school vacation week. I know that not everybody can get away, but having activities at home for families to go to is very, very important, particularly in a week when, depending on your circumstances, you have kids at home, they're looking for things to do. I think it's a great quality of life that both Quincy Resources and the city brings to everyone here.
Yep, I know thoughts are already looking to spring. I've already been informed by the Friends of Wollaston Beach. They're having their Shamrock Splash in March to raise money for the events on the beach this year. So things are going to start to ramp up.
Yeah, again, we're living a different kind of world post-COVID-ish. Still confused about where we are because I have all my friends catching the flu now. And you guys have heard me with the flu. And the dry weather is actually not helping my sinuses still. Even though it rained yesterday, it's now really dry out. For those who don't realize it, the outside is what, like 30, is it 30 degrees? It's
Not even, I don't think. Yeah.
I don't think even it's that. It's 10, 11, 10 on my clock. It says 10, 11 a.m. It's 31 degrees outside, feeling 26 with wind chill. So, I mean, after during a few days of warm weather and kind of some moisture, I mean, now I've flipped over sinus dried out. But I mean, people are trying to stay outdoors more. People are trying to reduce the possibility of forget just COVID, just the flu, the stomach bugs, just the common cold, RSV. I mean, there's so much going on that I think it's wise that people should not try to be in large gatherings during the height of viral transmissions.
Sure. What's going on Beacon Hill?
Well, we were in yesterday to vote on a bill to allow the governor's office through safeguards to access the interest in the rainy day / stabilization fund or stabilization / rainy day fund, depending on how you want to put it, for the exclusive purposes of paying down debt, providing some grant fundings for cities and towns, as well as leveraging the money to pay the state share for federal grants, in particular the most recent ones on the Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Bill, as well as the CHIPS Act. People don't realize that the grant monies provided to feds, the vast majority are not free rides. The state has to put up a portion, generally 10 or 20%, depending on the circumstances. The city and towns does the same things. Regarding capital projects, generally around 20% is give or take, on the type of project, sometimes more, sometimes less, the city or town has to put up their share of the program. The most famous one, you guys know, is school building assistance grants. It goes from anywhere from 40 to 80%, depending on circumstances, the state will reimburse. City of Quincy is very, very beneficial in that program, including the Squantum Schools up next on a repair project. Is it repair? I think it's repair.
It's replace, actually.
I'm sorry, replace. That's what happens when you think about schools well outside the district. So that's Bruce's problem. But yeah, the city has really benefited from that. It adds to the city debt load, but the state reimbursement, helps that along. So, we put in some safeguards though. I mean, the rainy day fund is what it sounds like. And we don't want the principal touched. So There'll be automatic transfers pursuant to comptroller's report of the interest to a separate fund that addresses what I just talked about. But there are situations where you cannot do the transfer. One is that the rainy day fund is smaller than 10% of the size of the state budget. State budget is approximately 56 million. Rainy day fund is 8.2 billion. So 56-ish billion against 8.2 billion, obviously it's greater than 10%.
Right.
The other one is if there's a decline in the rainy day fund, meaning that we're withdrawing money from the fund, that you're not going to take the interest out. And then there's a other safeguard I think the media kind of overlooked is that the withdrawal of funds can only occur up to December 31st, 2026. This is not a fund which you pull money out indefinitely. So it's more of a pilot program than anything else. On top of the fact that they have to report to the legislature, 30 days prior to using the money, as well as providing annual reports. So the House version is very conscientious about what the governor is trying to accomplish, using some of the interest to leverage against federal grants. But at the same time, though, the rainy day fund is far too important. You can't touch the principal. And in certain conditions, you can't touch the interest either. And again, it's also a pilot program because we do a December 31st, 2026, essentially sunset, and it gives the legislature a chance to reevaluate the program. So this is a nice little balancing act, because one of the big things that those who finance and banking, big concern is that particularly for government, when we state a purpose for a fund, lenders do not like the idea of using something outside the fund because they like assurances that we can pay our debt. Just like everybody else in life, unless you're the feds. Well, I joke. It's not entirely true, but
It's somewhat true, though.
somewhat true. But in seriousness, I mean, the state does try to keep their budget or our budget under 5% for debt load. Generally, we try to keep it close to 3%, but it varies from year to year, obviously. And rainy day funds gives assurances that regardless of the fiscal situation, we are able to pay our debts. Consider it's like a collateral.
Yeah, it's like literally money in the bank. Yeah.
Yeah, our rainy day funds, our various trust funds, all our funds are basically a type of collateral. But if we keep the use for those funds inside the purposes, Wall Street and the lenders are a little less concerned. And Treasurer's Office reminded us that when you look at our bond ratings, it's not just simply we compare our debts, it's a totality of the economics in Massachusetts, because obviously our tax revenues are tied to the strength of the economy, as well as education, job development, types of jobs. It's large factors to consider because we're not a corporation and we're not a homeowner. So obviously the calculation regarding the state's capacity to pay is very different. And, and most states, counties, and municipal governments don't have great bond numbers because you all think the bond rating should be awesome because we have taxpayers. Tax revenue is inconsistent.
Yeah. As we've seen. Yeah.
As we've seen, people under this false impression that it's like, oh, well, you have tax revenue, you go and get the best bond rating. Well, we can't print money, which is the feds, right? That's how they can maintain the bond rating, despite their ceiling issues and constant budgetary woes on not having the government fully funded. But, everyone else, pretty much, except maybe Alaska, California, and Texas, they all have different reserves because they have oil money to support not just their budgets, but also support collateral for the purposes of debt. From our standpoint, we can't deficit spend. So we're very conscientious and cautious about all this money we put into these various funds, especially the stabilization fund being the most important. Hopefully, we're working with the Treasurer's Office, Treasurer Goldberg's office. We found a good balancing act to assure that lenders to us are not nervous about our ability to pay back.
That's key. Otherwise, they will stop lending and you'll stop borrowing.
That's absolutely correct. And passing up and leveraging competition for these federal funds is crucial because it's a competitive competition against all 50 states and territories. So it isn't like, these infrastructure acts, like, Massachusetts is going to get X amount of money. No, it's an active process. The governor's office actually has to make applications.
Right. Yeah, we just saw that with the Cape Cod Bridge projects.
Yeah, it's real work with real folks that actually have to know how to do it to sort of grant writing. And if we can't demonstrate we have money ready to go, the feds will pass us over for another state. It's not complicated, people. I mean, if we're not ready, they're going to give it to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to be first in line there, or at least part of the queue for sure. Where do the funds from the stabilization fund come from, Jackie?
That's actually capital gains money. So after the '03 recession, which is the dot-com boom, it shows I'm showing my age. We were living high on capital gains money from like 1999-ish to like 2001, 2002, largely driven by the stock market, not by the real estate market. And because people were basically giving away stocks like it's toilet paper. And the dot-com boom was like no one could possibly lose in technology. And obviously that's not true. There's no such thing as a no lose.
No, the bubble did burst. Yes.
Yeah, and the state budget we discovered was really out of balance because cap gains vaporized instantly and resulted in a 10% revenue loss 3 months into a fiscal year. So, as a result of that, all future capital gains monies, doesn't matter what the capital gains is automatically deposited in a rainy day fund unless the legislature says otherwise.
Okay.
So the rainy day fund since, '03-ish, has been for the last 20 plus years now, been funded 100% by capital gains. And obviously there was a withdrawal during '03 to essentially, 2011, 12, because the tax revenues were stagnant, wages were deflating. Deflation's bad. And not to say that it was the sole reason, but yeah, cap gains wasn't coming in. You had wage deflation, which is lower taxes, income. I mean, this ain't complicated. And people started spending less. Consumers, would spend less and results in, sales tax decline. That's why the economy is so important to the state, even more than the feds in some ways, because since we can't deficit spend, the strength of the economy and people making money, directly impacts our ability to fund programs. But taking capital gains out of the main budget, takes away one type of very volatile tax income.
Yeah. Now, weren't changes just made to the capital gains tax just in this past budget?
There was a capital gains change on a last tax program reform last cycle. Last cycle.
Yep.
Kicks in actually, last year, not last cycle, last year that kicks in starting the upcoming tax year.
Okay.
Some kicking in 2023, some kicking in 2024. It deals with short-term gains. So I think we reduced short-term gains by 2%.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, and people were complaining that the short-term gains, doing so is like benefiting the rich. But I think COVID proved nothing else that platforms like Robinhood, which again, I'm not promoting that platform, I'm using that as an example, people day trade. And it is the younger generation that is engaging in this much more to make some quick money. And the so-called meme stocks, those of you aware of the GameStop story in particular, where a bunch of online folks ran up the price that's beyond its actual valuation, was able to make some fast money and pay short-term gains on it.
That was astounding to watch that happen. It was almost like magic.
Yeah, it's a very remarkable thing, but it's also changing. Actually, is a best demonstration of how we change getting information when people use social media, which I do not advise as a financial tool to figure out how to make money on market. And the markets are not predictable because they're human beings. Plus, now you got all these algorithms and AI stuff coming on board too. But people on social media made a monster change in the market, and but then tend to be also one-time changes. And these one-time incomes isn't like Mark Zuckerberg. They're literally probably an extra labor.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it just goes to show be leery and do your homework before you make any investments.
Well, I mean, I've been around this a long time, and I always say new dogs, old tricks. And whether the dog can learn new tricks. And the interesting thing I've always noticed about this gig is that people get locked into these mentalities, like we're living like 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and the mentality about society, not just on a social level, but also economic levels, is somehow trapped in amber of who we are. And one of the benefits I always say about this job is the fact you get to see different points of views. I get to read, I get to watch, seminars, I get to listen to other folks, and I'm always astounded that the people really are trapped in amber, on how they think the world works. It's a constant evolution. It doesn't sit in one spot. And a public policy has to move the evolution. And yes, the legislature is the slowest moving form of government. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, it's
But
designed that way.
oh, it's intentional. I mean, the
Right.
founding fathers made this as stagnated as possible to reduce the possibility of rapid decision making that actually has negative impact in the public.
Right.
Try to keep this little government involved because it just moves too slow in terms of public policy. That being said, though, I mean, we have to change, and not everyone sees the change. And if you do your job really well, my level, and you're really open-minded about understanding how the world's evolving around you, you can learn new tricks. And I'm getting older too, as I keep reminding folks. And I have to learn new things. I can't pretend this is 1995 when I first showed up working there, and it's not 1995. And I've watched a lot of change. And it's good because if we don't change, we don't move forward.
That's right. Adapt or get left behind. That's how the saying goes in the business world, at least.
Well, change or die, right? Evolution is one.
That's right. Can we talk a little bit, change gears a little bit, and talk about the state's lawsuit against the town of Milton for the MBTA Communities Act issue?
Yeah, for those who aren't aware, we passed a law requiring municipalities that are beneficiaries of public transportation, namely the MBTA, is required to change zoning laws to increase more multi-unit homes, especially for purposes of affordability. Because again, I still blame Deval Patrick for this whole thing about green communities and not thinking their way through about the cost it's going to be borne by renters and homeowners as a result. That's a longer complaint from me later on. However, the town of Milton did correctly put together a zoning plan, and since it is a town, you can put that in a warrant on whether or not you like the idea, which they did for the last town election. They rejected it. My understanding, I think another town is looking at is Rentham.
That's right.
Was looking to do the same thing. And now they're in violation of state law, which can put their grant monies in jeopardy that's tied to programs associated with this zoning change. I mean, Quincy's already made their zoning changes, and other communities have already moved forward. Now, just because they made a zoning change doesn't mean it's going to happen. You still have all these steps in development, financing. You guys already hear me talk over and over again. The interest rates are still outstandingly ridiculous. And it's not like it's going to be a magical overnight fix because it can take 5 to 15 years for it to develop to take off. So, and also you still got to pass the local planning board. You still got to get past inspections. It's a project, folks, right? You just can't decide I'm going to build a 10-story building and suddenly make it happen. You got all these hoops you got to go through. So it'll be intriguing to see how this goes because Attorney General has to enforce the law. And it's going to be enforced against the town of Milton, and frankly, unless the town of Milton can demonstrate that the law proposed is somehow like impossible to implement, I'm going to have a hard time seeing SJC saying that you got to do it.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. I think their argument is going to be, just from what I've heard initially, is that they're not rapid transit. They have the trolley, and of course they have buses too. But I think that's the angle they're going to take anyway.
They can try. I mean, those of us live in Walston and North Quincy know that Milton folks come over the border all the time to use a Walston Station, North Quincy T to commute to work. So, I mean, they are direct beneficiaries of the MBTA, and when it does work, tongue-in-cheek comment there.
That's for another show.
I'm keeping an eye on it, people, and still unhappy, but be that as it may. I mean, there are communities that benefit from MBT stations in Quincy. They are required, the town's required to pay an assessment to the MBTA, the same that the city pays assessment to the MBTA to share the costs in the geographic zone. But to say they're not a public transit community is then stop using our public transit.
Yeah, it will be interesting. And the Rentham case too. They must just have the commuter rail down there.
It's a commuter rail city. So, I mean, the commuter rail, I have mixed feelings about Greenbush and Old Colony. But put those issues aside again. There's an economic benefit to having public transit, including commuter rail in your area. Not just because people come down, but people can have a lower cost going up. And now gasoline, depending where you are, is running between 290, 293, can be as high as 320, 325. It's not necessarily just putting cars off the road for emissions purposes, but also people actually save money.
Yeah.
If gas is like $1.50, well, public transit may not be a savings depending on where you live.
Yeah, yeah. And of course it does, as we've seen here in Quincy, it spurs new commercial growth for sure.
Yeah, mostly housing right now. I mean,
Right now, yeah.
right now, I'll call it what it is. It's really housing. I mean, it hasn't created a lot of destinations for economic development, right? And this is kind of the weird thing that people keep making arguments for about public transit. It creates economic development. Not in the current environment. It's the last decade plus has been housing, 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 housing. So, I mean, it isn't like we built storefronts were developed as a result of mass transit. We are not a destination of Shoppingtown, USA. And some of the older folks know exactly what I'm saying. It's really a home destination. And the home destination is what creates the local shops, stores, restaurants in the neighborhoods, which are already pre-existing structures. There is no new economic development construction in Walton Center or Norfolk Downs, right? The storefronts have changed with the residents, not necessarily because of T. Now, the T does bring in new residents, but it isn't the driver for the changing economy in those economic areas.
Yeah, I mean, probably for commercial, I mean, State Street might be the last big one. We're seeing some smaller ones, and we'll see the new medical complex in Quincy Center. But other than that, you're right, it's mostly residential.
Yeah, and even State Street, when back in the 80s into the 90s, was a 24-hour nonstop, place. And the workers were there literally 24 hours and 3 or 4 shifts. People, they drove in from outside Quincy because, I mean, you're not going to get a train ride at 2 a.m.
Right.
So, you have these huge ass parking lots. There's a reason why they're so big out there. But, you're right. Public transit is designed in this state for the exclusive purpose of having people inside Boston to come outside of Boston and find work, and people living in what used to be more affordable communities to be able to go into Boston where rents could be higher, depending what part of the city, and also gives mobility for people to leave Boston to become homeowners.
Right, that too, yeah.
Yeah, public transit is not a simple public policy, just moving people around. It's actually economic driven. It's about housing. It's about giving people economic opportunities to expand their horizons. It's a lot of different factors. People tend to pigeonhole it into 2 categories these days: as environmental and just moving people around. It's actually much more involved. I mean, some folks, well before either one of us was alive. I mean, back when it was still just basically a commuter train, carrying cargo with a passenger component, people were trying to get home sewed up on Walston Hill, and part of it was the old, cargo passenger rail, and they used to try to give people year-long free rides on those cargo passenger rails in order to entice them to buy homes on Walston Hill.
Yeah. Certainly we're built out on Wollaston Hill.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a long time ago before the MBTA. But I mean, even 100 years ago, when the train system was very different looking, people already could see the vision of attracting people outside of Boston to be homeowners and try to find ways to entice them. And obviously, you all know back then, car ownership was very expensive, and gasoline was cheap, but not cheap when you consider the size of people's salaries.
Right.
So, anytime, train systems, have always been a type of enticement for work, but not just moving goods around. And it still is today.
We are speaking the Thursday before the Super Tuesday primary, Techie, and Massachusetts is part of that.
Yeah, it's going to be very low turnout. I just have a very hard time with people getting anywhere near any kind of excitement on what appears to be a foregone conclusion.
Hmm.
It's just the nature of the cycle. So I mean, I'll vote. Early voting, I think, ends. I think people are going to listen to this. It's going to be over by the time you hear me, actually. And mail-in ballots are already over by the time you hear my voice. You can still get mail-in ballots for September and November, though. So keep that in mind. Just because you didn't get your mail-in ballot for next week, you can get a mail-in ballot for the fall and the winter. Well, September, November. If you feel like you may not be home, you still have plenty of time for those ballots. Um, I mean, it is what it is. It's going to be very low key, and it just won't be here. I do think this is a litmus test in a different way for the presidential candidates regarding turnout, right? Is there sufficient space for them to widen their margins in the disagreements with their own parties? As you may be aware, in Michigan, because of the president's position regarding the Hamas Israel war, um, he's taking some pushback from the Arab Muslim population in Michigan, which is actually a very sizable voting base. And I believe, I haven't looked at the final numbers, but I believe it's almost 18% of vote for none of the above. And and Trump got over 30% in South Carolina of vote for Nikki Haley, but also close plus 30% for none of the above. Now, I always tell folks 30% is the normal I don't like you vote.
Mhm.
You
Right.
get below 30%, you're in good shape. You get it to 40%, you really got to reconsider your job.
Yeah.
So you could argue that, in Biden and Trump's case, they're in below, in the case of Biden, substantially below 30%. In the case of Trump, that 30% shown, means he's in a safe buffer. But that's only for the primary, not for the final. Because you should be concerned about whether that 30% in Trump's case is going to show up or not vote or vote for someone else in the final. In Biden's case, in the case of specifically Michigan, and that 18% in the final election could tip the scales in a very tight race of those Democratic voters. Even though the turnout wasn't awesome, those votes matter because I believe Michigan's a closed primary and South Carolina's a closed primary. So unenrolled voters aren't allowed to vote in those primaries, which means you have to capture all your party base, plus hunt for non-party affiliated voters, which can include things like libertarians and Green Party folks and other ones that are not Democrat Republicans, to try to push over the top in that state to win that electoral college votes. And that's why I was so focused. The strategy is a little bit different, depending on what math you're using, what state you're in, whether it's open or closed primaries. And right now, those states are closed primary. They're not looking for unenrolled voters. They're hunting heavily for party registration. Meanwhile, right now, unenrolled voters can pick any ballot they want in the primary and change how we calculate the math for presidential elections in November.
Mhm. Yep, exactly. It's going to be interesting to see. There, as you mentioned, there is a state primary also in September, so folks should be aware of that.
Yeah, I'd like to thank and wish well some colleagues of mine, Representative Capano from Lynn and Representative Khan from Newton, who announced they are departing the State House this week, not running for re-election. Rep. Khan was elected in 1994, came in the class in 1995. One of the oldest serving members, not the oldest, but one of the oldest serving members, and from the city of Newton. And actually, our colleague Ruth Balzer also is not running for re-election. She's in leadership, which opens up a leadership position. As you can tell, I have a whole list in my head about what positions are open. But in her case, I mean, it's great to work with both of them. I know it's a very liberal community, and Quincy is not. But this is a job of building relationships, not necessarily about political ideology. And I always enjoy my conversations, my time. And we're, I think, up to like 12-ish people leaving, or in case of our good friend Josh Cutler from Pembroke, working for Secretary of Labor. He's Undersecretary of Education, a long title. But people do have life after this gig, and sometimes it's a new job, and sometimes it's just time to move on from politics and retire. And I'm sure they'll stay busy. But this Newton, for the first time, is really going to have no delegation from the House. They only have 2 reps in, well, 3 technically. But there's really two reps that are inside Newton. One has one precinct, which I believe is my friend John Long. So it'll be a wild race in the city of Newton in that primary because it's a super Democratic city. Republicans, I'm sorry, folks, don't matter in a super liberal city. But that primary is going to be brutal to see, who's going to be able to represent not just the people in Newton, but, which way the politics move in Newton.
Yeah, keep an eye out for that for sure. We should mention the entire Quincy delegation is up for re-election.
Yep, I got my nomination papers. All of us got our nomination papers. Unenrolled voters and Democrats can sign our papers. And we're going to be out getting some signatures. You've been around long enough in this gig. You have a lot of friends, so we pretty much know who can sign my papers at this point. And we'll get more than the minimum. Unlike COVID year 2020, where I just barely got over the minimum. Thankfully, before
the streets were deserted.
Yeah, before they shut down the offices. I still remember the call from John Keenan. You got to get your papers out. Everything's closing. I was like, when are they closing Wednesday? Yeah, they accelerated it. What do you mean they accelerated it? So, changed my entire afternoon. I was like, got to get this stuff up to the Secretary Galvin's office now. Right. So yeah, I mean, we're all coming back. But again, 210 was our last real shakeup. Steve Tobin and Michael Morrissey, moving along, and before that was actually Michael Bellotti and Paul Harold.
Oh yeah, yep.
Back in 1992.
That sounds right. Yeah. Well.
So it's a long stint between huge shakeups in the Quincy delegation, and same in Newton. I shouldn't say it wasn't, but I mean, I think Haycon was 94 election. I think Wells was 2002 election. I remember Cindy Cream showing up, replacing Louis Pines. I believe that was the 98 election. So the Newton delegation has been very steady. And there's a good thing about steadiness. People know the district. People know what to advocate for. Seniority matters. New kids don't get anything in the State House. You have to build your time there to get stuff and be more relevant. And, hopefully climb the leadership ladder over long periods of time. And also made it to second leader. Which is significant.
Yep. Hey, Jackie, what do you think about what's going on down in Brockton with the request for the National Guard?
I'm still rather baffled by all that. I'm still not clear what incidents would require military intervention in your school. I'm very confused by this, what's going on there. Not to mention the fact they still short $30 million. They still don't know where it went.
Right.
Normally that would kill a mayor in any kind of race, but apparently didn't this time. So I'm very head scratchy about this because generally you should have sufficient human resources with the school department. But again, the $30 million is missing. Plus you got, local police. And I still don't understand this when I watch the news. I can't figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, obviously neither can they. So it's a question. I thought the governor did approve, I think, some grant funding to help them do a security audit. Yeah,
it's a hot mess of I don't understand.
Yeah.
And I just don't get it. I mean, and what's the National Guard going to do? I mean, they don't have conventional police powers.
Right. And I mean, some of them may be teachers in their civilian lives, but that's not their assignment.
Well, also, it's very intimidating. I mean, they're wearing military garb. They're not wearing police uniforms. I mean, either one can be very intimidating, people coming up. I do understand that. But I mean, the vision of a school system having military guard people around is peculiar.
Yes.
I just don't understand this. It creates a new intimidation factor.
I immediately thought of, showing my age, that the Kent State University issue back during the Vietnam era. I mean, that didn't end well.
No. Yeah, you're showing your age more than me. I was not around for that. But I mean, before that, you had Brown versus Board of Education, where the National Guard had to be called in to enforce the law because it was a federal ruling.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So
I still don't understand what's really going on. I've never heard of something like this before. I find it very bizarre. And again, this is a municipal problem. This is a state security issue. Unless, the state takes the school in receivership. I mean, but even then, there's a lot of municipal input in situations where even the state puts things in the show. I mean, we had Lawrence school system was just receivership, but it wasn't like the entire city government was cut out.
Right. Right. And it's a temporary status also. It doesn't last.
That's right. That's why I find the whole thing rather baffling. I just don't get it. It's weird.
Yeah, indeed. That's what best way to describe it right now for sure. What's your committee up to?
Not much. Right now, we're waiting for my bills to go to second stage, meaning goes to steering policy, third reading of Ways and Means. Generally, everything goes to steering and policy first normally, unless there's a direct track to Ways and Means. And we're monitoring bills that got to third reading right now. And the clerk's office still processing, which is why on the internet you guys are not seeing anything popping up that's new. Obviously, you can call the committee chairs if you want to get some information about where a bill is. And we're just kind of a waiting game at this point. My job is done in the sense that I got everything done on time, but the processing is out of my control. So, wait and see what goes to what committee. Then, working with the sponsors of those bills as well as working with House leadership. We'll see which ones we can get to the floor, whether formal or informal sessions.
Mhm.
And then we're getting more home petitions coming up, which are again these petitions from cities and towns. They file a bill, particularly looking for liquor license changes, and we'll continue our analysis like we always do on this.
Yeah, anything from Quincy that you're aware of?
No, Quincy, the big cities, except for Boston, which is kind of a quirky issue, generally do not submit home rule petitions. Generally, the cities are 100,000, in particular, greater, don't do liquor license changes.
Mhm.
Generally, sufficient licenses within the economic development plan to do that. Small cities, if you're under 30,000, it's not necessarily uncommon. Under 40, under 30,000, because they're really like just big towns for the purposes of analysis of liquor license issues and how they do economic development. But the little tiny towns, I mean, under 5,000, the quota system really works against them. If they want to do even very modest economic development, we'll see requests coming from them. So
Hmm.
I don't have the number right in front of me, but we'll process another 50 bills of this type during the year, which is not insubstantial, and it's not a rubber stamp. I mean, not everyone loves me because I require greater scrutiny on these things because they have a monetary value.
Mm.
And anytime we change the quota system on alcohol, affects somebody else, and very conscientious and impact with someone else, and also accountability, from cities and towns that they actually have an idea what they're doing, as opposed to just doing something for the sake of doing it because somebody has an idea to do it and they actually have no idea what they're actually doing.
Yeah, yeah. So they need somebody with some experience in these matters to look it over before they take a vote on it for sure.
Let's just say if I run statewide, a lot of municipal officials are going to hate me.
Yeah, but your job is not to be liked.
Yeah, sorry, folks. This is not a gig where you're the good guy all the time. Sometimes you're the bad guy. And being part of a chairmanship and being part of leadership, sometimes the answer is no. And I always tell this new chairman that come on board, everyone loves saying yes, but the hardest part is saying no.
Right, right. And it doesn't mean no forever. You can always revisit it, right?
While you willing to work with the chair and the chair has sufficient interest, we can amend bills in committee.
Right.
I tell folks, just because what you see coming out of filing deadline is not what you see coming out of committee. So, even myself, I mean, I can tell when a bill is not going to be the bill coming out of committee, but, say onto a bill, you think you got what you wanted. Well, you really didn't because the committee's going to change and also changes how we perceive it. So it's not impossible for people who file bills, who more actually co-sponsor bills, advocate against the bill, depending on how it comes out of committee.
Right. No, absolutely. And that goes for the governor too, right on down.
That's correct. Just because a legislator signs or co-signs a bill doesn't guarantee they're going to continue to support the bill depending on committee response.
It's a learning experience for sure. I'm sure for the new members.
Yeah, it takes about 6-ish years for people to get their sea legs under them, in my personal opinion. If you can't figure it out in 6 years, it's going to be a really tough haul. Very rarely, you saw chairmen being made in year 6, 3 terms. In the old days, you didn't see a chairmanship in the House to at least 6 terms, 12 years there. But because the very rapid rotation the last decade of members leaving, has really changed how Speaker DeLeo, now Speaker Morano, looks at the leadership team and try to figure out, a combination of talent, skill, and seniority,
Mhm.
who would be a benefit to the larger group. And sometimes, sorry to say, folks, you take a shot in the dark and hope for the best. And sometimes it pans out and sometimes it doesn't.
That's right. Yeah. Actually, speaking of this, I think the Senate's voting on a bill today regarding sex ed reform that's been through the process several times and changed over the years.
Oh, that thing's been constantly changing. I mean,
Yeah.
people think at the beginning is not the end. I love it when advocates send us fact sheets that are 2 years or 4 years or 6 years out of date. I mean, it's a constant, again, it's a constant evolution. And again, what comes out of one branch isn't guaranteed to come out of the other. Also, doesn't guarantee the other branches are going to do what they want, as we keep saying over and over again, conference committee, conference committee, conference committees, right? Unless you can cut a deal in an enactment phase and everyone's on board and no one's going to complain, we just do enactment phase amendments. Or we can pull the bill back and then re-engross, but, conference committee, conference committee, conference committees. So, that's a big part of this job. So, yeah, I mean, there's no guarantee what you see on one side is going to be on the other. Very rarely does the House and Senate have identical bills. Sometimes they're very small changes, very quick to resolve. Sometimes they're very major pieces that will bog down a bill because it's just that substantive that, each side has strong feelings on the matter.
Right, right. There needs to be there probably is classes on the bill process and legislative process. If not, there should be.
I can teach a class. I mean, not to disparage. Well, I do disparage. I mean, let's not lie. I always tell people, oh, you should go to, Kennedy School of Government. I look at some of the classes, and some are really fascinating. But you're spending money to do this, and I'm like, I could teach this stuff in a practical level that can make it like normal humans can understand. I mean, you've seen me talk over the years now, and I'm trying to avoid the technicalities of it all because you're going to just lose me in this talk. Yeah. Not you per se, because you know how this works, but I mean, the listener's going to just like listen to me and go, well, what is he talking about?
Right,
so
they just glaze over. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked very hard to try to make sure this is understandable to regular folks. But in a classroom setting, I can get really, really more technical and break it down over multiple days. The technicalities of it and make it a little easier. And it's a constant evolution. Just because the rules, are they, what they are this session, don't guarantee the rules are going to be identical next session. I mean, I didn't realize they removed the rule on requiring a rule regarding amendments prior to the budget. They got rid of that rule. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize we got rid of that one. Because I was preparing to debate a rule order and realized, oh, we're not doing that anymore.
Oh, see, still learning after all these years.
Yeah, and again, this isn't like death-defying change by any stretch. Right. Let's say a functionality change, but it is interesting how some of the stuff that's like I had gotten used to for decades, can change, and it's a small change. It's this again. This is not like a major shift in House functionality, but it creates a streamlining and simplifies some of this stuff. And again, I agree with the speaker and other folks I keep talking to in leadership that we are a majority party when, we have to provide some mechanisms for the minority party to be able to get the voice out. But at no point we let the minority party run the House.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you aware of any ballot questions, Tacky, that have made it through the process yet?
I think it's just the three that ride share, unionization, employee benefit ish. That's a whole mess. We've talked about this before.
Right. Yep.
And what's
workers
minimum wage issue? Again, that's more complicated unless you work in that industry. It's
right.
You understand it. If you don't work in the industry, it's different.
Yep. Yep.
And mushrooms.
Yep. I was going to say.
Oversimplify that statement, but yes.
The fungus bill. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oversimplified it. I did. But yeah, the psychedelic medical treatment bill, which is actively being researched regarding addressing issues like depression and other mental illnesses, and perhaps even some chemical imbalances in people depending on their ailment. But research is still fairly new. And I'm going to date you too. Remember when LSD was considered a drug for different mental disorders?
I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah, and how it didn't work out the way they thought it would.
At all. No. Matter of fact, had the opposite effect. Yeah.
Yeah, and that research is back online though, but it's not the LSD of the 60s.
Right. Exactly.
There'll be a decade of research in LSD again, but it isn't the same thing they had before. So I've always say again, if it's not broken, the voters won't try to fix it. If the voters can't understand what's going on, they always vote no.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Anything coming up in the district we'll be seeing you at in the near future?
Um, let's see here. Well, there's the Lincoln Hancock PTO has their fundraising event tomorrow.
Oh,
Uh, However, I have a small house party fundraiser coinciding that was not planned because we didn't know each other was going to be on the same day. Some of
okay.
the stuff I do plan out like 3, 4 months in advance, not just last week. And those wheels already went in motion. So, but folks, again, I always encourage people to support their local organizations, and please do support the Lincoln Hancock PTO. So, the Lions Club for Sight fundraiser is coming up. I think it's in mid-March. Obviously, had a great cause, great charity. People should consider donating if they haven't. If they can't make the event, I always donate if I can't make an event.
It's
Um,
April 4th.
April 4th. Okay, so about a month away. Marymount Association's having their 100th anniversary.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, that's a close party because that's for the Marymount Association. So,
Of
but
course, yeah.
we'll give a very early shout out, for the hard work the association does, for their neighbors and good quality of life. And they put a lot of effort in to that stuff. Obviously, St. Patrick's Day would be some point in the next 16-ish days, I think.
Mhm.
I think St. Patrick's is a Sunday. I think the 15th.
It's the 18th is a Monday.
18th is a Monday. But the
So it'd be
17th.
17th, it'd be a Sunday.
So, obviously Southeast going to have the event. People don't realize Springfield has a huge parade. Obviously, I'm not going to Springfield. And I'm not sure what's going on in Quincy on that. And the one short time period, I'm not Chinese anymore.
Everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day, right?
Yeah, but I just go with it.
Jackie O-Chan.
Pacquiao Chan, I think is a more accurate way.
Oh, yeah.
And then actually the Saturday will be in Lowell because there's Afghan refugees listening tour. So I'm going to visit them and listen to what's going on. And actually tonight I'm dressed up. I have to go to the State House. Obviously, you see a tie on at home, which is unusual. Is because the emperor's birthday party is tonight. Japanese emperor. I'm sorry, Japanese emperor. The Japanese consul is required to, as part of their job, is to celebrate emperor's birthday. As close to the birthday as possible. And the birthday is a national holiday, and the national holiday does move around because different emperors have different birthdays.
Right, right. Oh, I didn't know that.
So yeah, I mean, it's by invitation only, and I'll be representing the house this evening, at the Japanese consulate. So yeah, there's a few things going on. My budget meetings with Ways and Means are going to occur in March. So obviously a lot of meeting requests between myself and my staff are trying to make sure that everybody gets heard in my office. I can't meet everyone right now because there's too many overlaps.
Mhm.
Because everyone's trying to get into the door. So it's gotten very busy, and as I like to say, I mean, we don't really slow down until the end of session on July 31st, and
Right.
I'm not planning any extended time off until then. And of course, it's pending how this election cycle goes, not necessarily just for my election, but also my colleagues. Because, we do try to help each other out, whether it be through campaign finance support or we just show up and do some grunt work.
Mhm, mhm.
But, nothing will really be clear on what's going on until we get to the month of June.
Right. All right. Meantime, how do we get a hold of you?
617-722-2370. 617-722-2370 is the office number. We are staffed. Please do call. The front desk gets very busy. That's where we get the automated system sometimes. And it's Jerry Paracella's office, not mine. So you have to wait for a few prompts before you get to me. Tacky.chan at mahouse.gov, tackey.chan at mahouse.gov is my email. We encourage email and phone calls. You can track some information down at State Representative Tacky Chan Facebook. You can see my comings and goings, as well as tackychan.org is a resource page. We will try to update that regularly. at Tacky Chan at X. Yep, at Tacky Chan at X. Again, just like Facebook, we use that for not just communication, but let you know where I am. And
Yep, look for some fun photos there.
yeah, and that's how Joe finds me. So I really gotta change the photos around so you can't ask me questions. And of course, at emlegislature.gov, I really encourage folks to go to the legislature's website. It is a good website on finding what's going on in bills, watching public hearings, watching the sessions. I know QATV does broadcast some sessions. They have broadcast some of my older hearings, which took me surprised when I visit the office. I look at the screen like, why is that there? And of course, with Joe here on our weekly, mostly almost every week get-togethers, which approximate about probably like at least 45 plus shows a year, as well as obviously seeing Mark in Stateville. Definitely follow here. And since it's not my show, we keep calling it Tacky Talk. If you have anything of interest, please email Joe. And if you like this show, obviously Joe would like to hear that you like to hear us. And if not, if you guys all hate us, then I'm probably gonna get pulled. So
No, even then we wouldn't do it. It'd still be on. That's the beauty of local access.
flood Joe's email. Flood Joe's email.
I'd love to hear from folks if they have questions or comments or suggestions. Always, yeah.
Yeah, and you got your 5 to 10 minutes in the morning. And I do encourage people to try to get that quick podcast in, and you can actually see it on YouTube as well. And I think it's a great way for getting your sound bites along with the Quincy Sun on what's going on locally. And sometimes we forget that you can't catch everything on your social media or your news apps, as well as whatever you see on general broadcast news. QATV is a variable service, Quincy Sun is a variable service, and I always encourage people to you tune into local stuff, even if it's 5-10 minutes to get the quick updates of what's going on in the city.
Yep, thank you for that. We take great pride in focusing on Quincy information for sure, and to make sure it's accurate. So please do check that out. Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, absolutely. So, next we're going to talk in March next.
That's right. It'll flip the calendars over if anybody still uses one.
Well, we won't be doing this leap year thing for another 4 years, so.
That's right.
But
So while it lasts.
well, we're still doing this in 4 years. I guess we're going to pencil in February 29th specifically.
2028. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. Let's just try to get through next week.
Let's do that. Exactly. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Tacky.
Thank you, Joe. See you soon.